Order, please. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, before I begin today, it gives me great pride to introduce my family. They're in the gallery, in the East Gallery. I have my wife, Grace, my two sons, Jordan and Sean, and my daughter, Monique, who we can't see her over the railing, but she's there, ladies and gentlemen. And I also have my sister, Charmaine, and I'd like for them, the House, to welcome them as we do all our visitors. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to notice of motion given by me on March 28, 2003, and the rules and forms of the procedure of the House of Assembly, I have the honour, by command, to present a message from Her Honour, the Lieutenant Governor of the Province of Nova Scotia, relating to the estimates of sums required for the service of the province for the fiscal year ending March 31, 2004, which is, I hereby transmit estimates of sums required for the public service of the province for the year ending March 31, 2004, in accordance with the Constitution Act of 1867, recommend them, together with the budget address of my Minister of Finance, and any resolution or bills necessary or advisable to approve the estimates and implement the budget measures to the House of Assembly, signed Myra A. Freeman, Lieutenant Governor, April 3, 2003. Please be seated. Speaker, at this time I wish to table the message from Her Honour, the Lieutenant Governor, transmitting the estimates for the consideration of this House, table the estimate books, table the consolidated fiscal plan for the government consisting of the government business plan and other information contained in the budget, table the Crown Corporation business plans, table the estimate in Crown Corporation business plan resolutions, deliver my budget speech, and move that the estimates of sums required for the service of the province for the fiscal year ending March 31, 2004, being supplied to be granted to Her Majesty, and the Crown Corporation business plans be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Supply. Nick. There we go. Monsieur le Président, Mr. Speaker, when Nova Scotians tune into the supper hour news tonight or pick up their morning newspaper tomorrow, I hope that they will understand one thing. This is their budget. This is not some obscure fiscal treatise about balance sheets. This is about people. What we do here has impact on the lives and on their futures. This is about Nova Scotians who work hard to feed and clothe and house their families. They pay their taxes and they contribute to their communities. It's about children who have a right to grow up happy and healthy, and when they are ready, to find all the opportunity in the world right here at home. It's about Nova Scotians, ill or well, who are concerned about health care. Mr. Speaker, this budget is about Nova Scotians who believe that we can control our own destiny, and with that belief, have greater confidence in our future. This budget is for Nova Scotians who have weathered the years of deficit and cutbacks, wondering when, if ever, it would end. If the past has taught us anything, it is that government's first responsibility is to spend every tax dollar wisely. Taxpayers expect and deserve no less. We may not always succeed, but this government always tries, Mr. Speaker. Today, in Nova Scotia, carefully controlled spending is no longer a symptom of financial weakness. It is an enduring commitment to increasing financial strength. Mr. Speaker, 1 year ago, I had the privilege of presenting a budget that was all balanced. It was and is an all-in budget. Mr. Speaker, there were no off-book boondoggles or Crown Corporations bleeding red ink on hidden balance sheets. Today, I can report that we are forecasting a budgetary surplus for the 2002-2003 fiscal year, that is the year just ended, of $14.5 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every dime goes against the debt. Speaker, program spending was just 1% over the estimate presented a year ago. That is controlled spending. That is financial performance. And that record says that this government met and will continue to meet its first responsibility to spend every taxpayer's dollar wisely, Mr. Speaker. Monsieur le Président, j'ai l'honneur de soumettre aux membres de cette grande Assemblée et la population de Nouvelle-Écosse le budget pour l'année financière 2003-2004. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to present the 2003-2004 budget, estimates, and supporting documents to you, to this legislature, and to the people of our great province. This is an active government. I recommend to all members the government's business plan and Crown Corporation business plans, which I have laid on the table. I also beg leave to table the estimates and supplementary estimates for the year ahead. Additional budgetary detail is also provided in a series of budget background papers and also with bulletins. Taken together, Mr. Speaker, these volumes detail the revenues and the spending plans of the province for the fiscal year 2003-2004. In the interest of time, if not as an act of mercy, I will not draw attention to each of these programs and plans. I know that somewhere down the line I will be chastised for failing to mention some vital sector or important aspect of Nova Scotian life. But honestly, Mr. Speaker, budget speeches have grown too long, and today I intend to buck that trend and focus on the big picture. Monsieur le Président, vous avez devant vous un budget équilibré. Mr. Speaker, the 2003-2004 budget is balanced, and it anticipates a surplus of $2.8 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that surplus is based on revenues totaling $5.63 billion, an increase of $297 million over last year's budget estimate. The lion's share of that increase, $234 million, comes from provincial sources. That growth in own source revenue is a clear indication of steady economic growth here in our province of Nova Scotia. I should add, Mr. Speaker, that tax reductions totaling some $96 million have been netted against that revenue estimate. Mr. Speaker, the government is extending the large corporation capital tax for another 2 years to March 31, 2006. This tax applies to 1,040 of the largest of Nova Scotia's 24,000 corporations. It is expected to generate about $53 million in revenues for the province this year. Mr. Speaker, growth in provincial source revenues far exceeds the increase in revenues from the federal government. Budget-to-budget estimates show a $62.5 million increase in revenues from federal sources, with the only source of new federal funding being the First Minister's Agreement on Health Care. On behalf of Nova Scotians, I welcome the federal government back as a partner, albeit a minority partner in health care funding. We have missed them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2002, Nova Scotia experienced real economic growth of 3.1%, closely following the national growth rate, which was 3.4%. Employment grew at 1.2%, and unemployment remained at 9.7%. Nova Scotians' personal income levels grew at a rate of 3.5%, a half a point better than the 3% rate of inflation, Mr. Speaker. For the year ahead, in line with most other economic forecasters, we are projecting steady GDP and employment growth of 2.9% and 1.8% respectively, Mr. Speaker. On the spending side, the province's priorities remain consistent with those that we set as a government on day one: the health of Nova Scotians, the education of our children, and the strength of our economy. Our goal is healthier, more prosperous Nova Scotians living in an increasingly self-reliant province, Mr. Speaker. Our spending decisions reflect those priorities, and they also advance that goal. Year over year, spending to support the health and health care of Nova Scotians will increase by $140 million. Our investment in the education and the training of our children and young people has also increased by $55 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2003-2004, the province will invest more than $106 million in new highway construction and bridge replacement, and that represents a $16 million year-over-year increase in that budget. And I say investment. Investment is the appropriate word, Mr. Speaker. For a decade or more, the vital public works of this province were allowed to fall into disrepair. Roads, bridges, and ferries are essential elements of our economic infrastructure. But whether it's to get goods to the market or our children to the doctor, Nova Scotians need reliable roads. And it's the province's responsibility to provide those roads, Mr. Speaker, and we as a government are meeting that responsibility. 4 years ago, when this government came to office, we faced two equally debilitating deficits. The fiscal deficit was eliminated last year and remains at bay with the second successive balanced budget that I'm tabling today. I fear, Mr. Speaker, that it will take longer to eliminate the infrastructure deficit, and that is to put all the roads and schools in shape, but I say that we're on the right track. Mr. Speaker, the Nova Scotia Community College is an increasingly important part of Nova Scotia's economic infrastructure. This year, the province has committed $9 million to begin an ambitious program of facility improvements and new campus constructions at various college sites right across our province. Next year, an additional $29 million is earmarked for college expansion, which will take 7 years and cost $123 million to complete. Mr. Speaker, under this government, opportunities have steadily increased for Nova Scotians to train for good jobs in industries where the jobs are plentiful. We added 800 seats to our community college system, and with the expansion I mentioned, these opportunities will increase for an additional 2,500 students, Mr. Speaker. More young Nova Scotians, and some not so young, will be trained to take advantage of real prospects here at home. Mr. Speaker, after years of neglect, too many of our younger students, our children, still go off to schools that are inadequate or outdated. We have made great strides in just 3 years, but still have a way to go before parents in every community can rest assured that their children are in a quality facility. Des dépenses en capital totalisant près de 62 millions seront dirigés vers la construction de nouvelles écoles. 18,5 millions de plus serviront à la rénovation des écoles existantes. Ceci représente 8 nouvelles écoles et 45 projets de rénovation. Mr. Speaker, our 2003-2004 capital program includes almost $62 million for new public schools and another $18.5 million for school additions and alterations. That investment means 8 new schools and 45 upgraded schools. Mr. Speaker, to the critics of government's capital borrowing program, I offer no apologies, but I offer rather an invitation. Take a drive to visit some of Nova Scotia's older schools, and when you come back, and while you're getting your shocks fixed on your car, tell me again why we shouldn't borrow money for better roads or better schools. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the government is providing the tools people need to make the most of their lives. We are doing that within the confines of the province's ability to pay. All capital purchases are amortized in keeping with generally accepted accounting principles, Mr. Speaker. Our surplus is applied to the debt. So too are the proceeds from the sale of Crown assets such as Cisco and Nova Scotia Resources Limited, for which I have the responsibility. Mr. Speaker, under this government, the province's ability to manage its debt has improved, and the debt-to-GDP ratio has fallen from more than 46% when we took office to less than 42% in the last fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, under this government, foreign currency exposure has been reduced from more than 50% to less than 20%. We are no longer at the mercy of foreign bankers and international money traders. That, Mr. Speaker, is debt management. Yes, it could be, and it will become more aggressive as balanced budgets add up and our financial position gets stronger. But under this government, debt payments will not come at the expense of Nova Scotia's safety on our highways, nor at the expense of children who have every right to attend healthy schools. And I'll point out, Mr. Speaker, nor will these payments come at the expense of our ability to compete for jobs, investment, and homegrown talent. Debt payments won't come at the expense of our future, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the first responsibility of government is to spend the taxpayers' money wisely, surely the second is to take no more than is necessary to meet the needs of the people. The province's strengthening fiscal position provides an opportunity for governments to lower taxes, Mr. Speaker. And lower taxes will enhance the competitive position of our province relative to other jurisdictions. Lower taxes will keep the momentum in our growing economy. And lower taxes will spur consumer confidence, while lower business taxes will rev up the engine of economic growth. Beginning this year, and in each of the next 3 years, Nova Scotia will raise the annual business limit under which the small business tax rate applies by $25,000, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when fully implemented, this measure will save qualifying businesses up to $11,000 a year. In the first year, which is the 2003 year, we will raise the income threshold from $200,000 to $225,000, saving qualifying businesses up to $2,750. By 2006, the threshold will be $300,000. These increases match those announced by the federal government earlier in the year. That measure alone, Mr. Speaker, means $1.5 million to small businesses in Nova Scotia this year and will total more than $11 million collectively over the next 4 years. Speaker, while lower taxes are an incentive to growth, new investment is the gas that fuels the economic engine. In order to enhance access to capital for Nova Scotia businesses and to provide Nova Scotians with an ongoing outlet to invest in their own province, our equity tax credit will be extended to December 31st, 2006. Mr. Speaker, the credit has been significantly enhanced to draw more capital. The investment limit will be increased to $50,000 from $30,000. And investment will continue to attract a 30% non-refundable provincial tax credit, Mr. Speaker. That program and its hybrid, the Community Economic Development Investment Fund, or CEDIF, have since 1994 helped more than 300 businesses get started, raising more than $54 million from 5,000 investors in our province. Mr. Speaker, lower taxes and tax credits for small business make good public policy. Lower taxes for individual taxpayers and their family is that and more. It is an expression of confidence in the future of our province. Health care in Nova Scotia is dependable and it is accessible. Our investment in education is providing young Nova Scotians with a solid foundation that they need for success. Our budget is balanced. The time for tax relief has arrived. So, Speaker, today I am announcing a reduction in Nova Scotia personal income taxes. Effective January 1st, 2004, tax rates for all provincial income taxpayers will be lower by approximately 10%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the rate reduction will be the greatest at the lower income levels. For example, a family of 4 earning $30,000 per year will see an 11.4% tax savings. A family of 4 earning $70,000 will realize savings of 9.3%. Overall, the reduction in provincial income tax rates will save Nova Scotian taxpayers $147 million, 10% of the province's income tax revenues in the full 2004 tax year. Mr. Speaker, as a result of this tax reduction, some 3,500 Nova Scotians at the lower end of the income scale will no longer pay provincial income taxes at all. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia will have a more competitive tax environment and lower statutory tax rates in Atlantic Canada. And across Canada, only 3 provinces will have a lower marginal rate for higher income earners, and only 2 provinces will have a lower marginal rate for low income earners. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the province will provide a $155 Nova Scotia taxpayer refund to all Nova Scotians who pay provincial income tax. Mr. Speaker, the relief is based on an estimate of total tax relief that would have been provided through the tax system between July the 1st and December 31st. This method of tax reduction will get tax relief into the hands of Nova Scotians as quickly as possible, and as many as 438,000 Nova Scotians will receive this refund. Mr. Speaker, it will put $68 million directly into the hands of Nova Scotians and into the Nova Scotia economy. Mr. Speaker, every Nova Scotian taxpayer will benefit equally with a one-time payment of $155 regardless of income or taxes paid. This is equitable tax relief. And Mr. Speaker, most taxpayers will receive the refund in June or early July of this year. Mr. Speaker, the Conference Board of Canada has already stated that tax relief in the second half of 2003 is expected to boost consumer spending. This method of tax relief, a direct refund to taxpayers, will amplify the impact. Mr. Speaker, balanced budgets and lower taxes fulfill key commitments that we as a government made to Nova Scotians in 1999. We met those commitments not out of stubbornness or not out of pure motive of being true to our word. We met those commitments because they are right for Nova Scotia and they are right for today, Mr. Speaker. The economy is growing. Let's keep it growing. Our future, our children's future, is not assured by better health care. It is not assured by balanced budgets. Though both of these things make our future more secure. Our future is only assured when Nova Scotia has an economy that offers opportunity to everyone. Lower taxes alone won't get us there, but they are part of the picture. Mr. Speaker, lower taxes and investments in economic infrastructure are among the best ways that government can support economic growth, but they are not the only ways. This government has, from its first day in office, focused on easing the paper and regulatory burden imposed on our economy. Government's online business services have grown by leaps and bounds. needlessly complicated licensing and application processes have been simplified. And where we find innovation and creativity, our government will make direct investments. Therefore, we are committing $8 million to the Nova Scotia First Fund, where experience shows that every provincial dollar invested can be expected to lever another $10 in additional investment, Mr. Speaker. The Nova Scotia First Fund and InnovaCorp have been instrumental in turning innovative ideas and creative concepts into commercial success stories. Monsieur le Président, l'an prochain, notre province sera hôte au Congrès mondial acadien. 2004 marque aussi le 400e anniversaire de l'arrivée des Français à Nouvelle-Écosse et l'établissement d'une première colonie en Amérique du Nord. Des dizaines de milliers de visiteurs sont attendus durant le CMA pour célébrer ce moment historique. Plusieurs seront des descendants acadiennes et arriveront de partout d'Amérique du Nord et de l'Europe. Nous avons appuyé et nous continuons toujours d'appuyer ce grand événement. Cette année, nous avons affecté plus d'1 million à la promotion, à l'organisation et aux opérations du CMA. Mr. Speaker, next year, our great province will host the World Acadian Congress. 2004 also marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first European settlers in Nova Scotia, that being French settlers. The Congress will attract tens of thousands of visitors, many of Acadian descent and heritage, from all across North America and Europe. The government will support this historic event in many ways. This budget dedicates more than $1 million to assist in its promotion, organization, and other features. Mr. Speaker, we have allocated $750,000 to a potentially far-reaching initiative called Brand Nova Scotia. Due in part to the successes of our tourism advertising efforts and our minister, Nova Scotia is viewed internationally as a largely rural, tranquil seaside community with friendly folks and festivals galore. Well, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is all that and more. The Brand Nova Scotia campaign will paint a more complete picture of Nova Scotia as a center of excellence, business, innovation, and academic excellence. A great place to live and work. There is a national and international business audience that needs to see that picture, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, in today's knowledge-based global economy, prosperity follows education. And to some extent, this has always been true. For decades, reliable statistics have indicated that on average, income earned is directly proportional to education attained. Higher education must remain accessible to all young Nova Scotians so inclined and so gifted. Career and skills training must be expanded to meet the demand. In public school education, where the foundation is laid for a lifetime of citizenship and contribution, must be relevant and invigorating. Speaker, Nova Scotia's university play a vital role in the life of the province. Not only do they educate the leaders of tomorrow, but they contribute $1 billion to the economy of our great province, employ 17,000 people, and are responsible for more than 60% of the research and development so essential to our economic future. Speaker, we recently added $6 million to university funding, bringing their total grant to $207 million. This additional funding, paid in 2002-2003, will be part of the base in determining university funding levels in the year 2004-2005. Also, to provide debt relief to students who need it most, the province has committed $5.1 million. Mr. Speaker, some 9,500 Nova Scotians could see their student debt reduced as a result. Speaker, the program is specifically designed for expansion in future years. All told, Mr. Speaker, this government will increase its investment in our universities and university students by more than $11 million. Mr. Speaker, helping Nova Scotians get the right skills for jobs that are or will be available has become a significant effort of this government. The expansion of the Nova Scotia Community College proves that. We are also enhancing partnerships with business and industry to provide more Nova Scotians with the opportunity to learn new skills, but also to land better jobs. A total of $1.5 million in new investments have been earmarked for these skill development programs. As well, opportunities will be expanded for apprenticeship training delivered in a more timely manner. Fees for a range of apprenticeship training services have been increased to provide $326,000 in additional funding to support this valuable program. Mr. Speaker, the province is increasing its investment in public education this year by $43 million. There is no more important investment that Nova Scotians can make than in the future of our children. Teachers will be able to spend more time with children in the early, most impressionable school years. $2.5 million will be allocated to reduce class sizes. As detailed in Learning for Life, the government's plan to help children succeed in school and reach their full potential, we will dedicate additional resources, including more resource teachers, to help children with special needs, Mr. Speaker. Enhanced testing and assessments and a renewed concentration on the essentials of learning, reading, writing, and mathematics will add benefits of a growing investments in our classroom. Speaker, education resources are primarily for the benefit of the young. But as a government, we recognized early on that expanding learning opportunities for adults was important at a time when traditional jobs were disappearing and more knowledge jobs were emerging. We founded with great pride the Nova Scotia School for Adult Learning, and it was an immediate success. Some 4,000 Nova Scotians have benefited from this program. Mr. Speaker, this year we are investing an additional $700,000, bringing the total budget for adult learning to more than $5 million. Speaker, this increased investment will open enrollment and opportunities to many more Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, by their own account, no public service is of a greater importance or concern to Nova Scotians than health care. The budget I table today allocates an additional $140 million to health programs. The Department of Health's budget is now more than $2,111 million, Mr. Speaker. The budget of the new Office of Health Promotion, just entering its first year of operation, is approaching $15 million. And Speaker, the establishment of a Ministry of Health Promotion is a significant event in the history of our province. Like most, our healthcare system has increasingly become an illness and injury treatment system. The creation of the Ministry and Office of Health Promotion changes that. Since the government announced the Office of Health Promotion, critics have said, "Great idea, throw more money at it." Well, Mr. Speaker, that is not how this government operates, and Nova Scotians are glad of it. We love good ideas, that we fund solid business plans that clearly demonstrate the benefits to the people of our great province. Health promotion includes all the resources of the former Sport and Recreation Commission and a transfer of resources including $7.4 million from the Department of Health. To that, government has added $600,000 to develop new or enhance existing programs, and new investments of $250,000 will be used to increase a very significant commitment to tobacco control. Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, the government recognizes and acknowledges both the great sacrifice and contribution that family caregivers make in our society. Tax relief does not ease the pain, but it should help ease the financial burden many Nova Scotians experience when they care for family members who are sick or injured. Effective this year, the tax relief available to caregivers has been increased 75% from $223 to $408, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government has embarked on a broad range of initiatives to ensure and improve Nova Scotians' access to care and to ensure the delivery of dependable, well-planned health services right across our province. Of the $44 million budget-to-budget increase in insured program services, $29 million will secure and enhance access to physician services. Mr. Speaker, 9.7 increase in the pharmacare budget will keep prescriptions affordable by seniors by capping copay and holding premiums at last year's levels. The home care and care coordination budget has increased $5.3 million to $127 million. This increase will secure and extend home care services to more Nova Scotians, further reducing wait lists, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government's commitment to improve long-term care and to a better deal for seniors in care is absolute. An additional $18 million has been added, bringing the total long-term care expenditure to our province to $222.5 million. $8 million of that increase will reduce the financial contribution private pay residents of nursing homes make for their care, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the jury is now in. District health authorities are a marked improvement over the unruly and unwieldy regional health boards of 4 years ago. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are telling us that the quality of care, the quality of service, and the quality of management in our hospitals are simply better than they were, and they will keep getting better. Mr. Speaker, overall funding to district health authorities will increase by $43 million this year to more than $1 billion in total. District health authorities and the budgets and the hospitals that they operate are now assured of annual funding increases of at least 7%. In the year 2003-2004, Mr. Speaker, that means $19.6 million. Mr. Speaker, multi-year funding will help DHA's plan, program, and service improvements over a 3-year horizon. The resulting efficiencies will be passed along in terms of better care for our patients across this province. Speaker, some $5 million in additional funding has been provided to DHAs for programs that will improve access and shorten wait lists at hospitals across Nova Scotia. And an additional $5 million will improve access and shorten wait lists for cardiac care at the QE2, which serves patients from across our great province. The Health Department's budget, now more than 44% of all program spending, also includes funding to establish standards in the treatment of mental health and improve mental health services for children, Mr. Speaker, for $4 million. It also provides 8 additional seats at Dalhousie Medical School at a cost of $451,000, Mr. Speaker. It also increases the number of nurses' training seats, both at St. FX and at UCCB, at a cost of $1.4 million. And it also expands medical technology at a cost of $7.2 and to purchase much-needed medical equipment at $15 million across our province. Mr. Speaker, capital investments will total $30 million and will include the IWK renovations, Phase 2 of the Yarmouth Regional Hospital, the Cobequid Multi-Service Centre, and a facility to house a new MRI at the Cape Breton Health Complex. Mr. Speaker, the healthcare Nova Scotians need and depend on is in better shape today than it has been for years. Mr. Speaker, it is more dependable. Mr. Speaker, it is more accessible. And Mr. Speaker, it is more secure. As the government moves forward based on the principles and plans highlighted in the document, Your Health Matters, both our healthcare system and the health of Nova Scotians will continue to improve. Mr. Speaker, for too many years, provincial social assistance and municipal welfare were viewed solely as a way to support people who could not support themselves. And granted, for some in our society, that was and still remains the case. However, our government chose to also look at social assistance as a tool and to help people for a time, and then, with other supports in place, allow them to move on. Since coming to office in 1999, more than 9,000 Nova Scotians have benefited from that opportunity, Mr. Speaker. With ongoing support like pharmacare, childcare, or income supplements, they move beyond support to greater self-reliance and the personal satisfaction that can bring them. Mr. Speaker, income assistance payments are actually declining year over year due to a reduction in the caseloads. Meanwhile, the government continues to strengthen return-to-work initiatives. So this year, we will add another $3.7 million to child care and early learning initiatives. Speaker, some of this investment will be used to open child care resource and referral centers and to introduce an early language and learning program in more of our communities across our province. Very soon, Mr. Speaker, the Wood Street Secure Care Center facility in Truro will open for young clients who are experiencing severe difficulties, frequently as a result of neglect or abuse. Soon we'll be able to give these young people the care they need and deserve right here at home rather than abroad, Mr. Speaker.
Here, here.
Mr. Speaker, there is no more fundamental tenet of a free society than equality before the law. To continue that Nova Scotians in need have access to legal counsel, our government has increased funding to legal aid services in this budget by $3 million. Mr. Speaker, today marks the 5th time in fewer than 4 years this House has afforded me the great privilege of presenting a budget. And all indications are that this will be my last. I hope my colleagues on both sides of the House will permit me a brief personal digression. Ça fut un honneur et un privilège pour moi de siéger à l'Assemblée législative de la Nouvelle-Écosse comme représentant d'Argyle et de la communauté acadienne. It has been an honor to serve in this place, to serve Nova Scotia, and to serve with all members of this House on all sides. I thank my caucus colleagues for their understanding and support. I thank my cabinet colleagues for their guidance and their solidarity. And I think together that I believe that we've achieved many things. But most of all, I want to thank my Premier and my leader for the trust he has shown in me and for his unwavering friendship. I came to this place to make a contribution to my province. Maybe to make a difference, maybe to have a better future for my children and for the children of others. I believe the course set by this government, the course followed in this budget, will do that. So, Speaker, in the days ahead, there'll be much debate in this House and elsewhere on the path that this budget takes. But let us be clear on our destination. This budget is the product of a government that is confident about the future, that shares the vision of a growing number of Nova Scotians. This province can continue to grow stronger, smarter, healthier, and more prosperous. Financially, we are stronger with successive balanced budgets. We have and will continue to focus our investments in education where it belongs, in helping young Nova Scotians achieve and succeed. More dollars have been directed to frontline health care, to nurses and doctors, and to providing stable, predictable funding to hospitals. With a balanced budget and growing investments in health and education and our economic infrastructure, it is time to lower taxes for Nova Scotians. Every tax-paying Nova Scotian made a contribution to the financial recovery of this province, Mr. Speaker, and every tax-paying Nova Scotia deserves to share in the rewards that comes from that accomplishment.
Here, here.
But more than that, our generation's greatest legacy to the next should be a province that holds all the promise, all the opportunities that too many young Nova Scotians still look for somewhere down the road. As I have said before, the future of this province rests in the hands and the minds of working Nova Scotians. And when those hands hold a few more dollars, that future is much more brighter. lower taxes, sound economic infrastructure, our growing investment in education, healthier Nova Scotians, confidence in our future. That is the direction of this government, Mr. Speaker, and that is the direction of this budget. Thank you. Merci.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in my place to begin the address in reply to the budget as the finance critic for the official opposition. Mr. Speaker, I think my own personal response to what we've heard can be summed up in one question. Who do they think they're kidding? Mr. Speaker? Who do they think they're kidding that this is a fair budget, Mr. Speaker? Let me read a line that the minister just read to us. He says, quote, "Every tax-paying Nova Scotian made a contribution to the financial recovery of the province, and every tax-paying Nova Scotian deserves to share in the rewards that come from that accomplishment." Mr. Speaker, who do they think they're kidding? Right. There are 300,000 Nova Scotians who will not benefit from the tax refund the minister just announced. And why won't they benefit from the tax cut? Because they're too poor. They don't earn enough money. 300,000 Nova Scotians who live in the ridings of every single one of the members on that side, and their pitch in the next election is going to depend on fooling those people into thinking they're going to get something. Because, Mr. Speaker, the only people who get the $155 bribe are the people who earn enough to pay provincial tax.
Order, please. The honourable member would know that to use that word in this House unparliamentary, and I'd ask to retract that, please.
Okay, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax Fairview has the floor.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'll withdraw the word bribe.
Member for Halifax
but let's
Fairview
be very clear about this, about what the government is doing, is they're delivering a check with the Premier's name on it just in time for Election Day. Mr. Speaker, and Nova Scotians can choose their own word for that. I'll let Nova Scotians choose their own word for what that is, Mr. Speaker. Because what that crowd over there don't want people to realize is that 300,000 Nova Scotians don't make enough money to benefit from that tax refund. But, Mr. Speaker, those same 300,000 people who are mostly seniors, students, minimum wage earners, people who are unemployed and underemployed, they're paying the HST windfall that the government's reaped. Right. They're paying the HST windfall on gasoline, on home heating fuel, on the pharmacare increases this crowd has instituted, the $200 million plus increase in taxes and user fees. Those 300,000 people are paying and paying and paying, and they're going to get nothing from this government, except they're going to get a government that's going to try and fool them into thinking that they're getting something, but as a matter of fact, they're going to get nothing. Who do they think they're kidding? Now, Mr. Speaker, let me tell the House something else about this budget that I didn't hear in the minister's speech. Let me tell the House something else. Despite the much vaunted tax refund, which will be delivered just in time for Election Day, the actual amount of money that this government is taking out of the pockets of individual Nova Scotians, is it going down? No, it's going up. It's going up by $34.5 million, Mr. Speaker, because the taxes and fees that this crowd are instituting continue to go up. The tax on gasoline is going up. The tax on liquor is going up. The HST people are paying on their home heating oil is going up. Government's not doing a darn thing about insurance premiums going up, Mr. Speaker. Registry of motor vehicles fees are going up, and they're going up by $34.5 million more than the amount this crowd is going to try and claim they're giving back, Mr. Speaker. So while they deliver their pre-election $155, they're going to be taking out of Nova Scotians' pockets the same and more besides, with plenty left over, Mr. Speaker. Who do they think they're kidding, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, they want Nova Scotians to believe that this is a balanced budget. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if the word flim-flammery is parliamentary, but I'm going to use it, Mr. Speaker. The only reason the minister can stand in his place and claim that this budget is balanced is the rankest kind of accounting flim-flammery, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, what they've done, and I don't remember the minister referring to this in his speech, is they've changed the method by which they're calculating the value of pensions. The Teachers' Pension Fund, the Public Service Superannuation Fund. Now, let's go a little history lesson here, Mr. Speaker. They changed the method once already. They changed it when they came into office in order to make this crowd in the third party look bad, Mr. Speaker. And so in order to make this crowd look as bad as possible, they changed the method of pension accounting. And this year, when it would dump them into deficit, they've changed it again. They've changed it back to the way it was in order to make themselves look good, Mr. Speaker. Now, officials from the Department of Finance have promised to get a figure for us about what the true state of this budget would be if they hadn't changed the accounting method. Mr. Speaker, the minister just snapped his fingers and took probably at least $30 million off of his bottom line, Mr. Speaker, just by snapping his fingers and saying, I'm going to account for this differently, Mr. Speaker. Who do they think they're kidding, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, this crowd wants you to believe that the fiscal year just passed is being finished with a balanced budget. But, Mr. Speaker, guess what? No. They had to resort to flim-flammery. Again, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what this crowd has done in order to pretend that last year's budget was balanced, something I don't remember the Minister of Finance stating in his speech. 2 years ago, Mr. Speaker, they recorded a liability on their books of $35 million, which was an amount they might possibly have to refund to the federal government because of a tax collection error. It's fine, nothing wrong with that. These things happen. But now that the federal government has said that they're not going to collect the money, they put the money back on the books. But, Mr. Speaker, did they put it on the books in the year in which they recorded the liability? No, Mr. Speaker, they recorded it in a different year so that they could pretend they finished the year with a surplus, Mr. Speaker.
Flannery.
The truth, Mr. Speaker,
Donnie, where are you?
the truth is that for the 2002-2003 fiscal year, this crowd is running a deficit of $21 million.
There it is.
And
21 million.
they're only able to claim a surplus because of accounting flim-flammery, Mr. Speaker.
Shame.
Who do they think they're kidding?
Here, here.
Mr. Speaker,
Here, here.
let me talk for a moment now about seniors in long-term care. Because, Mr. Speaker, let me talk about seniors in long-term care, because this crowd wants everybody in Nova Scotia to believe that they've taken another step in the road of solving the problem of taking money from seniors in order to pay for their health care. And the budget appears to show an allocation of a number of millions of dollars to that end. But, Mr. Speaker, guess what? It's flim-flammery, Mr. Speaker. You know why? Because they haven't solved the problem. They haven't changed the assessment method. They haven't cut the list of things they're going to take into account. What this crowd is going to do is they're going to take the same stuff a little more slowly than they were before. So instead of bleeding a senior dry in 12 months, it's now going to take them maybe 14 months, Mr. Speaker. Nothing else has changed. Not one thing has changed in their long-term care policy, Mr. Speaker. Who do they think they're kidding?
Here, 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 here.
Mr. Speaker, I have a long list here, Mr. Speaker, of example after example of how this crowd is trying to pull over the wool over the eyes of Nova Scotians. They want to deliver a check to them just before Election Day with the Premier's signature on it,
Purchaser vote.
Mr. Speaker, completely forgetting that 300,000 Nova Scotians aren't going to get a darn thing, Mr. Speaker. And I will look forward to having my caucus colleagues spend the next several weeks explaining to that crowd and to Nova Scotians why that is such a wrong way to go about budgeting in Nova Scotia, because we're going to try and convince Nova Scotians that there is a better way.
There is a better way.
We have a better plan, Mr. Speaker. We are going to deliver real relief for today's Nova Scotia families, Mr. Speaker, and we'll do it without the flim-flammery, Mr. Speaker.
Here, here.
And with those words, Mr. Speaker, I move that debate and reply to the budget be adjourned.
Thank you. Before we begin the day routine, I have a couple of requests for introductions. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my great honor to acknowledge the presence in the gallery today of a group of students and teacher from my alma mater, Lunenburg High School. Present in the gallery today, we've got Ms. Kim Heber, who is the teacher. And we also have a number of students, and their project, by the way, Mr. Speaker, has been to role play members of this House. And, well, I'm sorry to report to the honourable members that apparently I'm away today playing in a badminton tournament. However, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of the students who are present here and who are members of this House, and one is has the honor of being the Lieutenant Governor. And I'll introduce them now. If they could stand, Nicole Oldive, who is the honourable member, the honourable leader of the opposition. Mark Feener, who is the Minister of Health. Robert Risser, who is the Attorney General and Minister of Justice. Jessica McIntosh, who is the Minister of Education. Taylor Knickel, who is the Premier. Arthur Delaney, who is the Minister of Tourism and Culture. And Kevin Romke, who is the Lieutenant Governor. Missing from today was, just for the benefit of members to see that it was very balanced. Besides myself missing today, we have another badminton player who's the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party, who is away playing. Anyway, thank you very much to honourable members. If we could give them our warm welcome to the members.
Certainly want to welcome our special guests to gallery today and have to say that they are a fine-looking cabinet. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture on introduction.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I draw your attention to the Speaker's Gallery. And in the Speaker's Gallery, we have with us today, joining the MLA from Eastern Shore, spouse, Colette Dukes there, joining her in Speaker's Gallery. It's my father, Mr. Speaker, Elakangas MacDonald, as well as two people that work with me in my Inverness office, Brenda and Willana MacDonald. And I would ask the House to welcome them here.
Okay, we welcome our guests to the gallery. Any further introductions? The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I also have another introduction to do. In the gallery present today are two people who work in my constituency office today and were a great deal of assistance to me, and that's Ms. Virginia Penny and Ms. Dale Keddy. If they could stand and receive the warm welcome of the House. Ms. Keddy would be, I believe, a descendant of the very first member for Lunenburg, the Keddy.
Thank you. Just before we go into the daily routine, I think both opposition caucuses have a copy of the lineup for question period that I handed out yesterday. The other thing is, I just got a note for all the members that are planning on attending the funeral tomorrow morning, that they're requesting all members arrive at the church by no later than 9:30 a.m. Begin the daily routine presenting reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. Introduction to bills. Notice of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on St. Valentine's Day, February 14, 1945, 26 sailors of the Royal Canadian Navy Volunteer Reserve and 35 British seamen lost their lives when an accidental fire and explosions destroyed their boats in berth at Ostend, Belgium. And whereas the Royal Canadian Naval Association's Ostend Memorial Task Force has worked with the good people of Ostend to have a memorial erected to the fallen sailors. And whereas Don Wright of Dartmouth, whose brothers James perished there, will be attending the dedication of the Ostend Naval Memorial Monument on May 8, 2003, therefore be it resolved that this House remember the brave sailors who died in the Ostend, Belgium disaster of February 14, 1945, including A.B. James B. Wright, DSN, and sends best wishes to the people of Ostend through his brother Don Wright of Dartmouth, who will be attending the dedication of the Ostend Naval Memorial Monument. Mr. Speaker, and I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the last election, the Premier on page 24 of his Blue Book stated the pursuit of post-secondary education should not leave Nova Scotians mired in debt. And whereas despite that promise, after 4 years of this government pocketing student aid money, the pursuit of a post-secondary education has left thousands of Nova Scotia students mired in debt. And whereas on the eve of an election, the Ham government last week, feeling guilty and hoping to gain votes, announced a scaled-back, greatly reduced loan remission program to replace the one his government cut 4 years ago. Therefore, be it resolved, the Premier reflect on his promise and tell the students of Nova Scotia, who will soon be graduating, why he has failed so miserably to live up to his word. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver here, no. Notice is tabled. Order, please. Notice the motion. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a solid grasp of mathematics is essential for success in many kinds of careers, and whereas poor math scores have been identified as a cause of attention in the education of Nova Scotia children, and whereas last January the Cobequid District Elementary School in Knoll put on a mathematics fair designed to raise awareness in parents of the progress their children were making in mathematics. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Ms. Grace Beattie, principal of the Cobequid District Elementary School, and her staff and students for hosting January's successful mathematics fair. And I receive waiver notice and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League has recently honored its top players at their annual awards banquet in Montreal. Marc-Andre Fleury has been named top defensive player, best pro prospect, and a second-team All-Star. Whereas Canadians from coast to coast cheered Marc-Andre Fleury of the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles as the goaltender for Team Canada in the 2003 World Junior Hockey Tournament hosted by Halifax and Sydney, and whereas the fans of the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles have had the pleasure of watching Marc-Andre develop his skills as a goaltender and as a role model for young hockey players. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this legislature congratulate Marc-Andre Fleury for receiving these honours and the contributions he has made to junior hockey. I would ask for waiver.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Waterford Midget AA Sharks had a dominating season in which they recorded a record of 33 wins, 2 losses, and 2 ties, and whereas the Sharks won their own annual Christmas tournament and went on to win the Cape Breton County hockey title, whereas the Sharks acquitted themselves well at last weekend's Nova Scotia playdowns at Tatamagouche. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulates the Waterford Midget AA Sharks players, coaches, and families on a very successful hockey season and wishes them well in future years. I seek waiver of notice, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the member from Dartmouth Cole Harbour brought to the attention of this House that the report of the Special Education Implementation Review Committee has failed to be implemented by this government. And whereas this report was presented to the Minister of Education in June of 2001, whereas the honourable member still felt compelled to imply that members of our party joined in the failure of this government to implement this report. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize that the member from Dartmouth Cole Harbour is in bad need of a math lesson because the special education report was released nearly 2 years into this current government's mandate. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Agreed? Here, no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Kirk Johnson, who hails from North Preston, won the WBO International Heavyweight title Saturday, March 15th in Dallas, Texas. Whereas Kirk beat Lou Savarese in 4 rounds after landing a strong right hook and an uppercut to knock his opponent down to win the fight. And whereas Kirk Johnson's record is now 34-1-1 with 25 KOs, and this ranks him number 8 in the World Boxing Organization and warranted an offer to fight WC champ and world number 1 hitter Lennox Lewis. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate Kirk Johnson in winning the prestigious WBO heavyweight title for Canada and his hometown of North Preston, and wish him well in his quest to fight for the world number 1 WBC championship title. I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on introduction.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to make this introduction today. Members of the NSGEU Local 66 with the Regional Residential Society Services are here to watch the proceedings today. Mr. Speaker, there are Tracy Best, Mayu Sandstrom, Mark Wells, Stephanie Howell, Larry Stewart, who is the strike coordinator, and of course Linda Power, who is also with them. And Mr. Speaker, they're here to make it known that they're having difficulty with negotiations with the Department of Community Services. Thank you.
Certainly welcome our special guest to the gallery today, the Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice in future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas there are 1,200 less licensed registered nurses in Nova Scotia than there were under the former Liberal government in 1999. And whereas there are currently 18 unfilled nursing positions at the Valley Regional Hospital alone because not one registered nurse applied. And whereas the Tory government continually tells Nova Scotians that its nurse recruitment and retention strategy is working, therefore it be resolved that the Tory government finally admit that having 1,200 less nurses leads to cancelled surgeries and increased wait times and means the Tories' nurse recruitment and retention strategy is not working for Nova Scotians. And I'd ask for a waiver.
Agreed.
Request for waivers is agreed. I hear a no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas for the 26th year, SEDMA welcomes thousands of young hockey players to participate in the SEDMA Honda International Minor Hockey Tournament. And whereas 243 teams hosted by the Dartmouth Whalers Minor Hockey Association will represent the 4 Atlantic provinces, Ontario, Quebec, the United States, as well as the Czech Republic. And whereas the great success of this tournament is due to the continued support of the Dartmouth Whalers Minor Hockey Association, the phenomenal team of volunteers that worked tirelessly to organize this tournament, and the commitment from coaches, parents, and team players. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this legislature congratulate the SEDMA Honda International Minor Hockey organizers and welcome the teams from away while wishing everyone involved an enjoyable, successful, and safe tournament this weekend. Thank you very much.
Request for waiver?
Waiver, that's what I meant to say.
All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to draw to the attention of members of the House an individual in the West Gallery, and I expect he's sitting in the West Gallery hoping that I wouldn't see him so I wouldn't do this today. But a very good friend of mine, he's a retired educator, highly respected in the community of Antigonish, does a tremendous amount of work on behalf of adult literacy, and he's totally dedicated to that cause. And he takes time out, Mr. Speaker, to act as my campaign manager. It's Mr. Walter Proctor from Antigonish. Yeah.
Thank you. We welcome Mr. Proctor to the gallery today. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas drug abuse is a major concern throughout Nova Scotia, and whereas community leaders in Eskasoni are taking aggressive action to reduce drug dependency, particularly prescription drug dependency in their community. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of this House congratulate Chief Blair Francis, Eskasoni Band Council, staff at the Eskasoni Health Clinic and Rehab Centre, and all other stakeholders for their commitment to making Eskasoni a healthier place to live. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Richmond.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas tomorrow, April 4th, 2003, the John Ham government will mark the one-year anniversary of dramatically imposing onerous FOIPOP fee increases, which has allowed it to hide in the shadows of secrecy. Whereas by imposing these onerous fees, the only privacy the Ham government has protected is its own. And whereas such an action of denying Nova Scotians access to government information clearly demonstrates yet another example of this government's failure to honour its own Blue Book promise of allowing for much greater disclosure of government information. Therefore be it resolved that as the Ham government reflects tomorrow on how these fees have fostered secrecy and undermined public scrutiny of his government, that he remember his promise to Nova Scotians and return the fees to their previous rates. The Speaker asks for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? Here, no. No's is tabled. Orders of the day or questions put by members. Question period given at 3:28 and at 4:28. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the irony of today's budget announcement is that the same people who won't get a dime will pay millions of dollars in HST on fuel oil. They will pay millions more in gasoline taxes. They will pay millions more in car insurance taxes. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, that these hard-working Nova Scotians will pay more than their share of the $74.6 million in higher taxes and fees outlined in the budget, but they will get nothing in return. My question for the Premier is this: Why do you force hundreds of thousands of Nova Scotians to pay millions to subsidize the tax cuts for others while they will get absolutely nothing?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if I may quote from a document that's been tabled in this House many times, the Blue Book, and if you turn to the cover, Mr. Speaker, on the very first page, it says, "My government will do this by reducing income taxes by 10% in our first mandate." This government believes that we have a covenant with the people of Nova Scotia to reduce taxes by 10%. Today we have done it.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, seniors who are stripped of their assets by this government will not get a dime. Students who this government is forcing into record debt will not get a dime. Hard-working Nova Scotians on minimum wage will not get a penny. Mr. Speaker, parents who stay home to look after their children or caregivers who stay at home to look after a sick loved one will not get a cent under this budget. So my question to the Premier is this: why is your tax cut designed so that seniors and students and hardworking people in this province get absolutely nothing?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite perhaps wasn't listening when the Minister of Finance read the budget address, because, among other things, 3,500 working families are eliminated from the tax rolls of this province by the steps that we have taken today. 3,500 families, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier misses the point. They weren't on the tax rolls to begin with. There is absolutely nothing. No, Mr. Speaker, they didn't make enough to pay tax, and he knows it. And he knows that they will get absolutely nothing from this budget. There's absolutely nothing subtle, though, Mr. Speaker, about what the Premier has done today. He has divided Nova Scotians according to the amount of their paycheck, Mr. Speaker. He has told Nova Scotians he values them according to their income. But the Premier's tax cut check will not go to the people this government has hit the hardest in the past 3 years. Seniors who are forced to pay for their health care, students with crippling debt, Nova Scotians on minimum wage. So my question to the Premier is this: why have you decided that 300,000 hard-working Nova Scotians don't deserve tax relief?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, let me remind the member opposite that lower taxes help working families. Lower taxes help working families. And let me remind the member opposite as well, because apparently he missed another part of the speech in which we announced $5.1 million of student debt relief to students here in Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, with today's budget, the veil has lifted and the real face of the Premier of this province has now shown through.
That's right.
This is a Premier that in the first page of his Blue Book said that he would not try to buy votes of Nova Scotians at election time. Yep. Same Premier who said he would live within his means. Same Premier who said he would no longer mortgage the future of his children in order to provide election promises. Yep. Same Premier who said he would respect voters. Well, how things have changed, Mr. Speaker, after 4 years of the Ham administration. Mr. Speaker, we're going back to the old Tory days of electioneering here in Nova Scotia. Except don't mind the bottle of rum today, Mr. Speaker, because the bottle of rum and the chocolate bars have been replaced with a $155 check. That is what we have seen today under this Tory administration. Mr. Speaker, before the last election, the Premier preached to the previous government.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Richmond on his question, please.
Mr. Speaker, before the last election, the Premier preached to Nova Scotians about how he would provide good government, honest government, and respect Nova Scotians. My question to the Premier, after 4 years, sir, what has changed?
Here, here.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in response to the member opposite from Richmond, first of all, I have in front of me the first page of the Blue Book from which he quoted. And I would ask him, before he quotes from the Blue Book again, perhaps he had better read it, because his quotes are inaccurate. And I would also, Mr. Speaker, remind the member opposite that if he reads the Blue Book, the commitment that we kept today has nothing to do with the next election. It is about the last election. We were elected to reduce taxes by 10%, and today we've done it.
Order, please. Order, please. Y'all member for order, please. Y'all member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the fact is, and the Premier knows itself, he gave his word to Nova Scotians. He put his own integrity on the line and said that I will live within my means. I will respect voters. I will not mortgage the future of our children. Mr. Speaker, the Premier has failed. His government has failed, and they've presented a budget today where they are saying not only have we added $521 million to the debt, we propose to add an additional $120 million to the debt next year. Mr. Premier, you gave your word to Nova Scotians you would live within your means and provide good government. I ask you again, sir, why have you failed to live up to that commitment?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, if you would allow me to quote from the Blue Book, we will establish practical targets for reducing the provincial debt, which has increased by almost $3.6 billion during 6 years of Liberal government. And we will establish those targets as the fifth and last commitment of our commitment to the people of Nova Scotia of good fiscal management.
The honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this Premier gave his word that he would live within his means. The fact that he now justifies continuing to add to the debt of this province is reprehensible. It's a true reflection of what type of government he intends to provide the people of Nova Scotia. That he now stands and says it's okay to add to the debt. Pay no attention. His Minister of Finance stands and not only am I borrowing this year, I'm going to continue to borrow and I make no apologies to it. Well, Mr. Premier, your Minister of Finance should apologize to your grandchildren that you said you would not make responsible for your spending that you are doing here in this budget. My question finally again to the Premier is, at what point, Premier, will you finally keep your word, stop spending more than the revenues that you're bringing in, and respect the voters rather than sending them a $155 check asking for their vote at election time?
Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the fifth commitment answers that question very, very clearly. Establish practical targets for reducing the provincial debt, which has increased by almost $3.6 billion during 6 years of Liberal government, and we will establish those practical targets before we go back to the people of Nova Scotia. Our fifth and final commitment will have been kept.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that they think that's very amusing, but it's just trenching on our time. Mr. Speaker, budgets. Well, it's true. You know, we've had enough of your silly rhetoric. You know, Mr. Speaker, budgets are about choices. The Premier and his colleagues have made their choice when it comes to seniors in nursing homes who pay for health care that is free.
Order, please.
For everyone else.
Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition has the floor.
When you ask Jamie a question, you're wasting your time.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have decided to keep squeezing every cent they can get from seniors. The so-called improvements they made last November cost far less than they promised. They underspent their budget for long-term care, and instead of keeping their word and using money to ease the burden of the Tory financial assessment, they now have a scheme ensuring that seniors will be driven into poverty, Mr. Speaker. What will the Premier tell Nova Scotia families why he decided to keep the unfair and intolerable financial assessment process for people entering long-term care facilities?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, that is a question for the Minister of Health.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, last fall we did make improvements to the system, Mr. Speaker, and within a very few days we will be announcing our plan to make further improvements to the system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the government claims they have an extra $68 million to hand out this year and an extra $147 million next year. The Premier's hands are full of cash, according to the budget speech that we just heard. Yet the Conservatives look seniors in the eye, seniors whose life savings have been seized by Tory hands, and they say, we're sorry, there's not very much for you. Yes, you need health care. Yes, your families have done everything possible to care for you, but no, the Conservatives will not treat you fairly. My question is this: why is the Premier expecting people in nursing homes and their families to pay through ongoing financial assessment for the election Tory handouts?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer that to the Minister of Health.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition knows well, as does every member of this House, that huge amounts of money have been put into nursing homes and home care since we came to office, Mr. Speaker. We do have a plan to help with nursing home costs. As well, we have kept pharmacare costs at a premium, costing the Nova Scotia taxpayer another $10 million because we do care about seniors, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Speaker, the Minister of Health doesn't get it. They're stripping seniors of everything they own, everything they have worked a lifetime for, Mr. Speaker, and they do it unashamedly. They don't care. Now, I know. No, I want to know. Yes, that's true, Mr. Speaker. They won't admit it, but it's true. Mr. Speaker, I know why. It's true, Mr. Speaker. I know why the Premier wants to give people a check at election time. Unless they actually get it into their hands, Nova Scotians won't believe promises of tax relief from this government that is taking more than $1,000 a year in higher fees and taxes from every family in this province. But the Premier is avoiding the question, a question that tens of thousands of people want him to answer. Why did this government break yet another promise by keeping harsh financial assessments for seniors in nursing homes?
For the Premier, the Honourable the Premier.
Thank you. I refer that to Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we are doing something in this mandate about a situation that has taken years and years and years to develop in Nova Scotia. We are not just talking about an issue, we are doing something about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, this is clearly a sad day for Nova Scotians. We are seeing here today, Mr. Speaker, a Premier that is trying to rewrite history and to review the financial commitments that he made to Nova Scotians in 1999 in order to justify a budget which is clearly meant to try to buy votes from Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, the budget presented today is clearly a platform that is all about borrowed money and broken promises. It's borrowed money that that will be taken from the Premier's grandchildren and the children of this province. Mr. Speaker, governments since the early 1990s have tried to bring fiscal sanity to this province. Now we have a Premier that has suddenly cast aside his principles when it comes to fiscal management and has brought this province 20 years back into the past. My question to the Premier is, how can you, sir, justify sending this province on a road to both fiscal and moral bankruptcy?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I refer that to the Minister of Finance.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I've been listening to the member opposite ramble on, and ramble is the operative clause. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite has stated so many facts that are wrong, I'm not even sure which one to start. The first one is, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, we have put forward a plan which brings about a surplus, Mr. Speaker, albeit a small one, of $2.8 million. At the same time, we are spending $250 million, Mr. Speaker, in capital projects across this province. A lot of that money, Mr. Speaker, is to build schools for children who require them, Mr. Speaker. A lot of that money is to go into building hospitals that are required across this province. And a lot of that money, Mr. Speaker, is going into roads. When that bunch across the floor, Mr. Speaker, was in office last year, they spent $30 million in capital on road. Mr. Speaker, since then, we have done a great deal in repairing our roads. That's required for a growing economy, and that's what that bunch doesn't understand anything about.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I can clearly understand why the Premier doesn't want to ask these questions, because I would certainly appreciate myself if I was going back on the commitments made to Nova Scotians. I wouldn't really want to answer those questions either. Instead, he passes it to a minister who's on his way out of here and leaves a legacy that we will be paying for years to come. Mr. Speaker, the fact is, this Premier said that he would be able to build roads, he would be able to fix bridges, he would be able to fix health care, he would be able to fix the fiscal situation of this province without borrowing 1 cent. Right. You, sir, have failed in that. And I ask you again today, at what point will you finally tell Nova Scotians that you will stop borrowing money, stop adding to this debt, and stop leaving a legacy of fiscal mismanagement in this province?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This government made 5 commitments. 1, balance the budget. 2, put surpluses towards the debt, which the Minister of Finance did today. 3, reduce the debt to GDP ratio. 4,
Foreign exposure. Reduce the foreign exposure of our debt.
4 was reduce the foreign exposure in our debt. And we've done that from 50% to 20%. And I will again remind the Minister that the debt reduction targets that we promised as Step 5 will be introduced, will be made public before we go to the polls.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, do you realize, Mr. Speaker, in the 5 promises that he just listed, respecting Nova Scotians was conveniently left out? Remember in 1999 how he would respect voters? Now it's not even on his list of things he intends to do because he realized he has not done that. Mr. Speaker, who does the Premier believe in this province is going to accept that sending out a $155 check on the eve or during an election is not a cynical attempt to try to curry favor with Nova Scotians at election time with their own tax money, which ironically is part of what they are continuing to borrow? I ask the Premier once again, Premier, will you stand in your place today, sir, and say that you have maintained your commitment to respect the people of Nova Scotians with your budget today that would send these checks out prior to an election or during the election?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I would point out to the member opposite and to all members of the House that in the Blue Book, page 30, the 4th line from the bottom, our commitment was a 10% cut in income taxes, and that would be in the 4th year of our mandate. Today, in the 4th year of our mandate, we delivered the 10% tax cut.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm now going to read a list of the tax increases in this budget, and I'm going to take a deep breath. Mr. Speaker, bracket creep and freezing of exemption levels, $28 million up. Corporate income taxes, $65 million up. Sales tax, $37 million up. Tobacco tax, $21 million up. Gas tax, $8.5 million. Liquor corporation tax, $6.5 million. Registry of motor vehicle fees up $1.1 million. Mr. Speaker, a grand total in this budget of an increase in taxes of $74.6 million. And even if you net out the reduction of income tax, taxes are going up after this budget. They're going up $34.5 million. My question to the minister, who do you think you're kidding?
Hear, hear, hear.
Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the question that was asked by the member opposite shows the difference of this party and that party. Because what the member opposite has shown, you know, that taxes have increased in fuel taxes have increased in many other areas. You know why they've increased, Mr. Speaker? Because the economy has improved. Mr. Speaker, you know, Mr. Speaker, what we have witnessed here today is a complete lack of understanding by the NDP of what makes the world go round. In their estimation, Mr. Speaker, money comes from nowhere or probably the federal government. That isn't the way that it works. Our economy is doing well. With the changes that we have initiated today, Mr. Speaker, they will continue. That's why we're doing it. The member opposite doesn't understand that, but in all fairness, I probably didn't expect him to do so.
The member for Halifax Fairview, and your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I know some seniors in Fairview that have paid more money to that minister because they had to heat their homes this winter. I want that minister to come out to Fairview and tell them that they're paying more because their incomes went up. Mr. Speaker, the only reason that this minister can claim that he has a surplus last year is because with a snap of his fingers, he's put $35 million of pretend revenue on the accounts, something that first came off in 01-02, and any reasonable person would have made the adjustment in 01-02 instead of in 02-03. Mr. Speaker, the real deficit last year is $21 million.
Question.
My question to the Minister of Finance, who do you think you're kidding?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite would like us to believe that somehow we've manipulated the statements of the province. Mr. Speaker, these statements are in order with generally accepted accounting principles, and they are balanced. The member opposite continues to try to make the case that they are not balanced. Mr. Speaker, the reality is they are. And Mr. Speaker, for that I make no apologies. That was a commitment that our Premier and our party made, and today we have delivered on that, and we will deliver on the next one, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman member for Halifax Fairview and final supplementary.
When that minister came in, he changed the valuation of pensions to make that crowd look bad. And as soon as it's going to start making him look bad, he's changing the method of accounting back again. And that's the only reason that he's showing his razor-thin surplus again this year, by snapping his fingers and changing the accounting rules, Mr. Speaker. That's the kind of flim-flammery that we expect from the Liberals, Mr. Speaker. My question for the minister: after snapping your fingers and changing the method of accounting for pensions, who do you think you're kidding?
Hear, hear.
Gentleman Minister of Finance.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know one thing. People that I'm not kidding is the taxpayers of this province, because we have dealt with the problems that we face as a province. We have balanced our budget last year, and we have balanced our budget this year, Mr. Speaker. That is what we said we would do. The member opposite is obviously trying to misportray the facts. The facts speak for themselves.
Gentleman member for Halifax Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Rum bottle politics is back with a vengeance in Nova Scotia. Yep. It's like the days of politicians doling out favours from the back of a station wagon at election time. Mr. Speaker, the government is going to...
Order, please. That is... Well, whether he's talking about... Whatever he's talking about, he's the... non-member suggesting that some wrongdoing or impugnative motive, and I asked him to change his line of questioning if he wants to continue along. The honourable member for Halifax Fairview has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Some would believe there are court cases that...
honourable member for Halifax Fairview has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just before this crowd is going to go out and ask for votes of Nova Scotians, they're going to cut them a check, some of them, not all of them, some of them, a check for $155 with the Premier's name on it. Mr. Speaker, that has to be a new definition of cynical, even for Nova Scotia politics. So my question for the Premier, the same question that I think he just got outside: which one comes first, the check or the vote?
Hear, hear.
Now will the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite doesn't feel that government should keep its commitments. Today, the government kept a very significant commitment it made to the people of Nova Scotia in 1999. So if that is the accusation is that we have kept our word to Nova Scotians, then I plead guilty.
Gentleman member for Halifax Fairview and your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are some ghosts in the attic of Province House just laughing their heads off today, Mr. Speaker, and one of them sounds a lot like John Buchanan. Mr. Speaker, this government had choices. They could have given back their HST windfall. They could have made it easier for Nova Scotians to heat their homes. They could have lowered pharmacare co-pays. They could have solved the ongoing tragedy of long-term care assessments. They could have made choices to help Nova Scotia families. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier is, will he just all save us some time and money and deliver the checks to Tory candidates before the next election?
Hear, 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 hear.
Now will the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, lower taxes help working families. Lower taxes create jobs and revenues. Lower taxes increase our competitiveness in this country. This will make us stronger, better. This will make us more prosperous.
Gentleman member for Halifax Fairview and your final supplementary.
Tell you what I'm going to do, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to call my sister, the nurse who works in North Carolina, the Canadian nurse who works in North Carolina. I'm going to ask her if she's going to move back for $155, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Premier is simply this. This is the modern-day version of rum, silk stockings, and chocolates, Mr. Speaker. Very familiar Nova Scotia politics. What does the Premier suggest that we all say, that his candidates say, to the 300,000 Nova Scotians that are going to get nothing?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, our government has worked very hard in growing revenues, and we've been very successful because the minister reported today the dramatic increase in provincial revenues due to a growing economy. the easiest way to bring prosperity to all Nova Scotians, regardless of income, is to grow the economy, and everything we do is directed towards that very item, growing the economy.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, last night we learned that the Minister has a plan for the residents of small option homes being operated by the Regional Residential Service Society. Mr. Speaker, he's going to place 35 of them on the 7th floor of the Nova Scotia Hospital. Mr. Speaker, if you're not aware, this is the old forensic unit of the Nova Scotia Hospital. And my question to the Minister is, why is this Minister regressing back to the days of institutionalization instead of assuring that the needs of these clients will be made available in surroundings that they are familiar with?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to be able to straighten some things out for the member opposite. First of all, I'd like to point out that there's a very dedicated board of the Regional Residential Service Society that have been working hard to care for these residents. And I would also like to point out that, in fact, they're the ones, Mr. Speaker, that are charged with having a contingency plan. They've worked hard on this. And, Mr. Speaker, the last point that I would like to make is that that is not the case. They are considering the nurses' residence on that property. Thank you.
The honourable member for Clare, and your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to table this for the Minister because maybe the Minister hasn't seen this bulletin that came out last night.
Read your own mail.
Mr. Speaker, this Minister is responsible for the residents, regardless of how he cuts it. He's responsible for those residents. Mr. Speaker, maybe the Minister should spend a day in a small option home. These are very special people with very special challenges. Why the Minister would even accept this happening is beyond me. My question again to the Minister is, why won't this Minister provide the necessary support so that these residents are cared for in familiar surroundings?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the member opposite again giving me a chance to speak about the wonderful care that's being provided by the RRSS. And I'd also like to start by saying how they've made it a point to be in constant contact with the families throughout this, just in case there was